Hi everyone, welcome to my week 3 presentation on compensation. Compensation is one of the basic methods that an organization uses to attract, retain, and even motivate employees. With the competition in both public and private sectors, it's really important to get at least the compensation right because that's sort of the first step. And employees, they do expect fair salaries for the services that they perform. But there's also various factors that may affect their expectation and how they respond towards compensation. And so I'm gonna go over actually all 3 points this week because I feel like I can briefly touch on all 3 points and sort of gives you sort of a flow on how all three areas do affect the employees. First, how the relationship is established, how the goals are aligned for both the individual and the organization, and how sometimes compensation does sort of create discontent among employees. So the first topic would be compensation and how it quantifies the relationship between the individual and the organization. Compensation is usually what usually we perceive as what we're sort of worth in general, right? And that is true because an organization creates the compensation scale based off of experience, education, the type of duties that needs to be performed. And so they do a lot of data research behind it, and also in competition with the private market. It has to be well-rounded in order to attract the right talent, right? And all that is translated into compensation, right? And so how they first attract the potential applicants to the organization. So right off the bat, when any one of us looks at a salary, based off of a job search we're looking at. The position is what focuses us on the search, right? But when we see the pay, we kind of get a feel of maybe how that organization will value us, and sort of we get this first impression on what we're worth, right? And vice versa, right? An organization or different organizations have different criteria, right? They have different jobs, different factors, different levels of responsibility for maybe possibly the same job title, right? And in that case, compensation would vary as well. And so that relationship starts right off the bat with compensation. Now, compensation aligns individual and organizational objectives based off of different factors, right? And how it's weighed. Meaning, for example, the job itself, right? If it's how significant is this job to the organization, right? What type of goals are they trying to achieve? What type of services are being mandated, right? Or demanded by the public. And so it really depends on what the objectives are for both the organization and the individual, because the individual has a different sort of perspective on their self-value, right? Based off of whether their experience, their education, them looking at the job market. There's different competitions between the public and private sector, and so their objectives are different. Some other factors may be whether if their objectives are to, climb the ladder, right? Or if they just want stability, right? It all depends on what the individual's objective is as well. Now, compensation aligns that pretty well because, again, that's the first thing, as I mentioned before, that in potential employees see, right? And that's also the first impression that the organization gives out, right? And so right there, we can sort of see it in a snapshot, right? And making this decision of whether we will apply for this job and whether if we're the organization, whether if we would accept this employee, right? Based off of, our objectives and their objectives. So we usually put that forward, in the form of compensation, as a first impression. Now, we've probably all seen this in the workplace, where compensation often causes discontent among employees, right? Um, it goes to towards our readings this week in regards to the equity theory, right? There's a certain expectation on what we should get paid, by our own perspective, based off of the job responsibility, and again, vice versa, right? And how the organization feels we should get paid based off of the responsibilities they're giving to the employee. However, there's also other factors as well, right? External equity. I mentioned previously that there are different markets out there, right? Competition for good applicants is very high, right? Especially competing with the private sector, where they generally don't have much budgeting issues as the public sector does. And so, a lot of the things that employees consider, right, often causes us to, be discontent, right, with what we have. Whether it being seeing somebody else on, on a different pay grade, but has the same education and experience as you do, right? That would cause discontent. Or whether if it's assigning a project, right, that provides overtime, right? If that's an issue there, and if that's not equally distributed, right, then there is discontent as well. But the probably more I guess prominent example is sort of you have exempt and non-exempt employees, right? Often managers or employees that can sort of have their own autonomy are exempt, and where they do get paid only a salary, right? And they don't get paid overtime, right? However, there's an exchange there, right? They sometimes have a different schedule, right? There's not a set time to their weekly schedule in comparison, right? And you know, others seeing that may have discontent. On the other hand, right, somebody that is exempt may see everybody else getting overtime pay, right? And they're questioning, why am I, in this position doing more, right, as far as responsibility goes, but you know, there's not much additional benefits, right? And so often these are factors that causes discontent in regards to compensation. So in closing, compensation is really a sort of a critical factor, especially towards the beginning, right? Organizations are in competition for good, skilled employees, and as the saying goes, right? Good help is hard to find, right? And so the important importance of performance, skill, education, right? The type of compensation systems that an organization decides on, whether it be merit-based, seniority system, skill-based. They need to, do additional research and really look into things and see how other areas in the market are getting all the talent, right? We lose a lot of talent to the private sector, based off of compensation, right? But not only that, there's also other benefits, right, that public organizations can offer in order to make that up, right? And so there's a lot of factors and areas that an organization needs to deal with when dealing with compensation and how they attract, retain, and train employees, right, or develop them based off of evaluations and promotions, right? And for the individual, I think people need to consider the total compensation. Right? There's, as I mentioned, benefits that a lot of public sector organizations offer that does make up the difference, and sometimes benefits the individual even more, right, based off of their own objectives or life impacts. And so, people need to consider a lot of different factors when looking for a job and how they see the organization. And the organization needs to carefully think about their strategies and how to attract the right talent. Um, so I hope everybody enjoyed my presentation this week. It's a little bit long. I do apologize about that. And have a good week. Bye.